What does it really take to build something extraordinary? Behind every thriving business is a powerful mix of grit, creativity, risk, and the relentless drive to keep going when others would stop. Welcome to the Next Venture Alliance Show, the podcast where entrepreneurs, innovators, and trusted advisors come together to uncover the stories and strategies behind remarkable ventures. With your host, Oliver Kotelnikov. Whether you're building, buying, scaling, or selling, this is your space to learn, get inspired, and prepare for your next venture.
Good morning and welcome to the Next Venture Alliance Show. My name is Oliver Kotelnikov. I'm an entrepreneur, a storyteller, mergers and acquisitions advisor, and business and commercial real estate broker. On this show, we talk with founders, business owners, self-starters, industry leaders, and trusted advisors who support them. And together we explore both the strategic and human sides of entrepreneurship. On today's episode, I'm joined by Tim Melia. Tim is a principal with Embolden Financial Planning. Embolden provides advice-only, comprehensive financial planning services on an hourly consulting basis. Areas of focus include sustainable investing, cash flow and debt management, retirement tax, and estate planning, personal finance education and goal setting, and real estate investing. Embolden serves clients nationwide with a regional focus on Washington, Oregon, and California. And before this, Tim spent a decade at Laird Norton Wealth Management, consulting ultra-high net worth individuals and families in all phases of financial planning. Tim has a degree in business administration from the University of Gonzaga and an executive certificate in financial planning from Seattle University. Tim and his wife, Melissa, also founded and sold Madison Management, a boutique property management firm in Seattle, which happens to be how we met. And Tim, what a journey, what a resume. Nice to see you again. Welcome to the Next Venture Alliance Show.
Thank you, Oliver. I'm happy to be here. And before we get going, all of my Gonzaga friends will kill me if I don't correct you. It's Gonzaga University, not University of Gonzaga.
Sorry.
Those eggs, but that just had to correct you there.
No, I appreciate it. And so, the worlds of entrepreneurship and financial planning are closely intertwined. They travel hand in hand. You're both a professional financial advisor and a business owner. How did you get started and what led up to, your current venture and Embolden?
Yeah. So forgive me if I go too far back here, but when I graduated from Gonzaga University.
I'll never forget it. I promise.
I'm going to keep repeating here. So I graduated just after the dot-com boom and bust. And so, I was kind of in that phase where it's like, oh, I got to get into technology. That's where the money is. That's where the longevity in career, is. And so I started off as a network administrator for a small production company, and I was there for a few years. And it was interesting, but what I found more interesting is now I was getting paid, and I had a paycheck coming in, and I was wondering, what do I do with this money? How do I make the most of it? How do I plan for the future? And so that kind of led me to digging into personal finance. I was reading everything I could find and, just trying to learn as much as I could. And that kind of, I shared that with my friends and family, and they were asking me questions and about personal finance. And, it felt good to kind of help them, figure out some of this stuff, just based on my own research. And that kind of led me to a decision that, I wanted to make a career change and I wanted to get into personal finance. And so that led me to a small financial planning firm here in Seattle that I worked at for a few years, and, really got to see kind of how a firm operates, kind of the nuts and bolts of things. And while I was there, I got my certification as a certified financial planner, and I got my graduate degree from Seattle University. And then I moved on to Laird Norton Wealth Management, you mentioned in the introduction there. And I was there for 10 years. And I was working with a couple of different types of clients. We were a corporate trustee, which means we were helping to administer trusts. So we were working with the beneficiaries of trusts and things like that. But also, I had the opportunity to work with a lot of business owners who had sold their businesses, had had liquidity events, and were kind of in this new phase of life with, this money. Maybe they hadn't been, doing the personal finance stuff all along, and they wanted to kind of turn it over to professionals to help with the wealth management. And so, got a lot of opportunity to work with those types of clients. All the while, Oliver, my wife and I were buying single family homes, living in them, remodeling them, and eventually turning them into rental properties. And we did this a couple of times. And this, again, family and friends kind of took interest, and they started asking, can you help me with my rental property? And that kind of led us to start a residential property management firm here in Seattle. And that grew to a point where my wife left her full-time profession. And then eventually I left financial planning in 2018 to go full-time in the business. Did that for about 4 years. We weathered COVID as property managers here in Seattle, and you know the story kind of well there. And we decided it was time to sell the business, and that kind of gave me an opportunity to choose my own adventure. What do I want to do next? And I knew I wanted to get back into financial planning, but I wanted to do it the way that I wanted to do it, and that was in the hourly fee only, advice only model of financial planning. And so, kind of endeavored to start that up. And, at the start of 2023, I started that business, and that's kind of where you find me here today.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you for that overview, and through all that, you've got the entrepreneurial spirit. You're always you're looking at kind of the next horizon and following your own interest, right? And what,
Yeah.
taking cues from what you're doing and saying, okay, can this be something that's turned into a business? And then you're getting feedback from friends and family, which is often that closest circle that tells you, hey, we've 10 family members have asked us about this. Clearly there's a need for this. And on the financial planning part, I think historically it's a difficult area for business owners. Just one, as humans, for us, long range planning is difficult. We have fires burning in front of us right now. As a business owner, you've been a business owner, you need to
Yeah.
invest in equipment, you need to invest in infrastructure. The instinct is just to put everything into the business today, oftentimes. But I think the other challenge is it seems like a big lift understanding financial planning. There's different terms, right? Terminology, like, what is the difference between, investing, financial planning, estate planning, money management, retirement planning, wealth advisory?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they the same? Are they different? And then,
Yeah.
people feel like there's a big commitment to be made. They need to sit down, they need to understand the terms, they need to allocate money. And the response is, it, and you've seen this probably, we'll get to it, how, and it gets kicked down the road. So how do you address maybe the differences between those terms? And
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll first apologize on behalf of the finance industry that we like to use jargon sometime. And every time I meet with a client, I say, forgive me in advance if I start throwing around jargon. If I
yeah.
do, please raise your hand. I want to make sure that you understand what we're talking about here. But financial planning, if I could kind of describe it, is kind of, if you think about an umbrella, financial planning is kind of the umbrella, and with covered under that umbrella is different pieces of financial planning. The investment portfolio, I think for a lot of people, investments comes to mind when you think about financial planning. Thinking about, where do we deploy our dollars? What types of accounts do we put them in? How do we allocate our investments? All that kind of stuff lands in the investment piece of it. But there's more to it. Insurance. In my practice, I don't sell insurance. I don't make any commissions on any products, but insurance is an important thing to think about because if we're not properly insured for certain things, it could derail our plan that we're kind of endeavoring to solve for. And so I'm engaging with my clients in the area of insurance. The big ones are, life insurance, disability
Mhm.
insurance, all the way out to the end of our plan, which is the polite way to say when we die. Is there a need for long-term care insurance? Our living situation may be different there at the end of life, and we want to give some consideration to that. So all sorts of things in that insurance space. Um, Estate planning, that's the wills, the powers of attorney, the healthcare directives, all those kind of things, trusts, those kind of things. So, we'll talk strategically, or I'll talk strategically with clients about, what makes sense for you and your situation to kind of, again, protect those assets. And not only are we thinking about what do things look like during your lifetime, but what happens after you pass. We want it to be kind of a cohesive strategy all the way through. And so what happens to those assets after you pass? Are your loved ones taken care of via that estate planning? And then taxes, taxes touch everything that we talk about in financial planning. And, a lot of it is, how do we optimize things from a tax perspective? And there's any number of things that looks like. I've, a lot of, big question a lot of my clients have is, we've saved all of our life, we've invested all of our life, and then we kind of hit that retirement point. That's a huge shift in a mindset to now have to start to draw down those assets and start spending them. That's a thing that we kind of engage with in the tax space. All sorts of other things. When do we collect Social Security? Are there opportunities to do things with tax advantage accounts like conversions to Roths? All sorts of different things. That's kind of the tax planning space. But all of that I would say is kind of encompassed in that kind of financial planning universe.
Mhm. And I mean, is there a way for someone who, let's say, a busy business owner, who doesn't, has a surface level of knowledge and, maybe recognizes the terms that we just used, but how do you start wrapping your heads around your arms around the whole concept and say, okay, which pieces apply to me? What do I need to look at? Um, you know,
Yeah.
so
So sometimes
how do you make it actionable, I guess, is it for someone who just is starting from zero or has minimal engagement?
yeah, it's tricky sometimes. And I really like to kind of meet my clients where they are. A lot of times they'll come to me because something is triggering this need, right? And so wherever that pain point is, maybe that's a good point to start. But it really is a conversation. And if a client comes to me with a concern in one area, very quickly it kind of connects to these other topics. We don't kind of operate in a vacuum. Each
Hmm.
topic is connected to the other. And when I'm constructing a plan for a client, it's really important for us to kind of hit all of these categories. And ultimately, I'm giving recommendations to a client as their fiduciary, what I think is in their best interest to get solve for the goals that they're trying to accomplish. But it's okay to kind of take that in little bits and pieces as they have capacity for, or the energy to implement, and things like that. It's kind of a iterative process where we kind of just build and build and build and build to get to a place where the client wants to be, or get to a place where we can achieve the goals that they're trying to achieve.
Well, that sounds manageable and it's starting to get dialed in. I think many listeners will like to hear that. And what I like about Embolden is that it seems to recognize this divide and the fact that this is fairly complex, right? If you're not dealing with this if you're not in this profession full time, or not a full time kind of an enthusiast and understand the terms, that it's complex, and so you strive to educate. One of the things you do is educate people about the process and clients, and take the time to do it, which I think is conducive with your business model at Embolden, which is hourly advice, and there's not a conflict of interest built in there where, I mean, talk about the model and how that ties into what we're talking about.
Yeah. So the way I approach things is, I am an advice only financial planner. So, we will have many conversations, and my ultimate deliverable to you is advice. I think you, the client, would benefit from doing this thing, and here is why. And here are the pros and cons of it for your consideration. And then it's up to you to go implement that thing. You could decide that the advice I'm giving you, yeah, you don't necessarily agree with it, and so you don't have to do anything with it. But I am giving you what I think is in your best interest, and I do want to hit on and appreciate that, you know business owners are full time, 24/7 focused on the success of the business. What does the business produce? Maybe that's my day job, and then at night, I have to do kind of the behind the scenes operations of the
Mhm.
business, the books, all that kind of stuff. And then whatever time I have left, boy, I'd like to take a break. I'd like to go hang out with my family. I don't want to go do financial planning. So I appreciate that. And I feel like I can be a partner in the decision making and the consideration of things, and kind of help identify the things that we should be thinking about, or the things that we're kind of missing in your existing plan and things like that. And to kind of represent that I want to be a partner, that kind of ties into how I charge for my service. I charge an hourly fee for the advice that I give, which is different than, I would say, a majority of kind of that wealth management financial planning space, where they're charging an assets under management fee, and they're going to say you have to have a certain amount of money for me to work with you. And that's prohibitive, especially for clients that have businesses where all their assets are tied up in this business, and maybe they don't have a lot in their investment account. They maybe can't get into the door with a lot of other wealth managers. And I'm of the mind that everybody needs financial planning, and I this is a low barrier to entry, where you basically just have to pay the hourly fee, but I want everybody to get the advice. um, and so, that kind of is a way that kind of sets me apart from, I think, a larger universe of financial professionals, is the advice only, hourly fee only model.
I think it takes away the all or nothing mentality that is the barrier for people, is to say, well, I just don't have enough either time or money or understanding to do financial planning, so I'm not going to do any of it. It sounds like, with your business and what it's trying to address on, years of experience in the industry, is saying, look, there are many people that want to invest, and maybe a little bit at a time, or getting a slow start, or doing what you can, like you said, meeting them where they are is better than doing nothing. And at a certain point, you do gain knowledge and experience, and through conversations with you do become more comfortable. I mean, it's a skill at the end of the day, right? Much like any other skill that you
Yeah,
have
yeah,
to practice and build a habit, if you will.
yeah, yeah. I acknowledge that it could be kind of intimidating to I mean, you do have to kind of open yourself up to, a financial professional, that this is what I've been doing. I'm not sure if it's been right or wrong. I'm looking to you for some assistance. And, I'm really focused on creating kind of a judgment free zone. Like, hey, okay, you've been doing this. Maybe we could do this. This will put you in a better situation because of these reasons, you know, or what you've been doing is great. And I commend you and compliment you. And I don't have anything new to offer you. Good job. But it's an intimidating thing to kind of open up about your finances and your money. And there's a lot of issues and baggage tied up in how we think about money, how we interact with our family and spouses about money.
Mhm.
There's a lot. This is a very loaded topic for a lot of people, and it's I appreciate people being willing to engage with someone like me to, make sure that they're making the right decisions for their family and things like that. So, yeah.
And there is the fiduciary advisory part, which is which explain the idea of a fiduciary advisor in the financial
Yeah.
world, what that
You know,
means. And
yeah,
you
in
know,
in the financial planning universe, again, there are professionals out there where their sole driver is how do I make more money for myself? How do I sell this investment product with the highest fee so that I get the commissions and the kickbacks and all that kind of stuff. Those people are not fiduciaries. A fiduciary is someone that is putting the interest of the clients first.
Mhm.
So as your fiduciary, as my client's fiduciary, everything that I share with them is because I think it's in their best interest. And unfortunately, because of things you hear in the news and all that kind of stuff, the Bernie Madoffs of the world and all that kind of stuff, the financial industry is tainted in that way, and it's very unfortunate. And so I'm very proud that as a certified financial planner I have made a commitment to the fiduciary standard. You'll find it in my agreement with clients that I am stating that contractually I'm your fiduciary. But it's really important for clients to know that the things that I do are because I think it's in your best interest, not because it puts more money in my pocket.
and that's an important distinction. Again, it sounds like you've this venture of Embolden, addresses all of the gaps and blind spots that you've learned through your career as an advisor and a business owner, um, and are able to now advise business owners, with their best interest in mind. And you help. Again, you don't draw a generational divide either, right? You're helping everybody from Gen Zs to baby boomers. I mean, whoever, like, is meeting people where they are. I mean, is that your client book? Do you have
Yeah,
kind of people
yeah.
from every walk of life and every generation?
Totally. Yeah, I get that question a lot. Who, Tim, is your typical client? And it really kind of runs the gamut. I've got kids fresh out of college or even in high school sometimes that, you know, are with their parents' assistance sometimes are just looking to kind of set course correctly before they even start making that first paycheck, like making sure they make money wise decisions from the get go. I've got clients that are already in retirement and maybe early in retirement and want to kind of make sure just checking in that they're on the right path, they're doing the right things, thinking about all those things. And then I would say a majority of my clients, though, kind of land in what I would call the sandwich generation, where they're working, they're thinking about their retirement, but they may also have older parents and family in the picture where they have to think about maybe supporting them with their time or their money, and then kids. They've got younger kids, maybe sending them to college. Planning on how to help them in their lifetime. So I would say a majority of the clients land there, but really, to the point, everybody can benefit from financial planning. Really, it's true. It's just maybe a different conversation. Very young, very old, or right in the middle.
So ages 6 to 96 is there's not a too early or too late for financial planning. And I mean, should it be taught in schools? Should it be talked about around
Absolutely.
dinner tables? I mean, what's your
Totally. Totally. I am you may want to ask my children the answer to this question
So I so
because
I saw where you had that conversation with your kid. I think it was on LinkedIn when you said, if we win $1 billion, if we win the lottery, what would we
yes,
do? Right? As an
yes,
example that
yes.
you're having with your kids
My
conversation.
my poor children, we can't do anything without me trying to draw some
So
connective
you're,
tissue to a
you're
financial planning topic. But, the topic you talk about, yeah, thinking about, young people talking about financial planning, it's kind of an interesting space because they don't have a lot of perspective and sometimes it doesn't mean anything to them. But we had a really cool experience where arbitrarily we bought a lottery ticket because it was like, the $1 billion jackpot or something like that. And we knew we were going to lose, right? But it was a cool opportunity to ask the family around the dinner table, what would you do with this money. And
Mm.
God love my daughter. She was like, well, I'd give it to charity. Okay. That's really neat. But I'm curious, let's be a little selfish here. Like, what would you do with it? And so it was just a really interesting conversation. And I love the fact that kind of sparked my kids' gears in their brains kind of turning a little bit on this topic. And, um, I look for things like that on a day-to-day basis. Like, what can I kind of turn into just an open conversation about money stuff, right? So yeah, so 6-year-olds, it looks a little different, but there's opportunities to talk about money.
But I think that's key is finding real life examples, because if you were to pick one common thread of, the gripes that kids have with formal education, it's what does this have to do with real life? And they start asking this right around middle school somewhere when they start struggling with math or geometry or science. They say, this has nothing to do with real life. Teach me about something. And so if you're able to draw that parallel and connect it to something that relates to them, which at that age is key. It's hard to,
Yeah.
you know, project out kind of an abstraction to something. But if you can connect it to real life examples, I think that's, that early age demographic that would be the key to that education. And I also think it should be taught in schools. And
Yeah. I know that some states, some school districts are making efforts that way, and I applaud that. I love it. I think it's fantastic and it's needed. I think we've got a long way to go in that regard, and I support any sort of endeavors by governments to kind of make that a priority. I often think about my own experience where I had basically no financial education through high school, but for go to the grocery store and price things out so you get a sense for, what it's like to live, on your own paycheck. But, you roll into college and you've got tables full of people giving you stuff to sign up for credit cards. You then go into a meeting with your financial aid person and they say, sign here, here's this money to be used for paying for tuition. And if I'm being honest, when I went through that, I was like, okay, my parents said to go in and do this thing. A credit card, ooh, that'd be nice. I'll just sign up here. Like we are not arming our children with the education that they need because there's a lot of low hanging opportunities to make big mistakes early in life from a financial perspective. Like you start off on the wrong path with a credit card, or if you're not fully understanding of what you're committing to with that student loan, you can find yourself in a real tough situation when you get that education and you get that first paycheck. A lot of it might be going where you don't want it to go, and that's to pay for those early on mistakes. So don't get me started on the literacy for kids around finances. It's a very important
it's
thing.
a yeah. And in with how rapidly things are changing, and I'm talking kind of a wide lens, things changing technologically, AI, are we are things going to change drastically in the financial planning world? Are we able to plan today for college 15 years from now, or is it completely uncertain and unpredictable? Because I can tell you, I missed, yeah, I could say we kind of bombed college planning. We did it, but it didn't end up where we thought it would end up. So,
Yeah, it is such an interesting conversation that I have with clients these days and with my wife about our own children is what is college going to look like? What is the need for college? Given I would say, oh, this has changed, at least for me, over the last 5 or 10 years, is the importance of college. You hear all the headlines about how expensive college is, and
yeah,
then you think about, well, what's the return on this investment if they're leaving with a degree that doesn't get them anything more than an entry level job and a big old debt that they are now responsible for. um, we've I explore with clients, it college for our kids isn't going to look like college for us. And so how we plan for it is kind of a bit of an unknown now. Like, is it a trade school? Is it a community college where they could get a good enough education to get the same job if they went to a more expensive situation? And then you throw artificial intelligence into this whole conversation, and then you wonder, what is that even going to look like? What education do they need? Is it to be the programmer of the artificial intelligence? Is that going to be one of the only careers going forward? Um, I don't know, but it is definitely something that I talk with clients a lot about.
Yeah. And it brings the question of, planning. How do you plan for the unknown? There's kind of a contradiction built into the very foundation, of that. And, what, in terms of business owners, let's shift from kind of the college planning, but to the entrepreneurial and small business ownership world. What are some of the products out there, if there are any? I mean, are there kind of entry level things that people can get going on? And what are some of or maybe there's something on the horizon that you see coming that we should be paying attention to?
Yeah. So one thing that I see with my clients that are, business owners or, solo, entrepreneurs is, the opportunity to take advantage of, like employer related retirement plans, things that if you set up, like a retirement plan for your business, and there's I'm not going to get into specific advice here, but there are, tax advantage savings vehicles that you kind of now have the opportunity to establish because you own a business, and it could be beneficial to the bottom line from a tax perspective, but it can also be beneficial to clients long term saving for retirement. And it can also be a beneficial opportunity to start to diversify their assets away from the business. Like, a business is a very big illiquid investment for a lot of business owners. But
Mhm.
to start giving consideration to funding those retirement plans, investing in things like the stock market and the bond market, more liquid investments, that sometimes gets lost in the shuffle for business owners who are, understandably so, have blinders and are focused on the business, the day to day, that kind of thing. And so that's a conversation that I have with clients. Like, what does it look like after you sell the business? Are we, kind of thinking about that, starting down that path, taking advantage of those kind of things now? So those are the important, some of the top of mind things that I hit with a lot of, business owners if they're not already implementing those type things.
Yeah, and it's early stage conversations, and any amount of time that you can build in and plan for, because, like you just said, business owners will be, uber focused on their business. And sometimes that's the only the only retirement, that they have, right? And then so they're planning on that to retirement. They don't always, very often, they don't know what the value of it is, but
Yeah.
we're already making future plans, or we know what the value of it is. We list it for sale, we sell it, and then we come talk to Tim and say, well, how do we mitigate taxes? How do we earmark this for something else? Which
Yeah.
at that point could be too late. So a sale of a business really should be one point of your overall financial plan, because at the end of the day, it's an asset like anything else that needs to be managed and optimized for taxes and kind of future financial goals.
Yeah. Yeah. I hesitate to use the "it's too late" response, because
Sure.
I'll say it's never too late. I will say there are probably less and less opportunities to do, you know, the better things with our money the longer we wait. And so, I encourage clients, even if you don't have like liquid assets, if you don't, want to hit kind of the insurance, the estate planning conversations too hard, it's really important to have the conversations, to start putting things on your radar of things to think about. Like, when you do have some liquidity, what do we kind of do first? Or hopefully this business grows. And so we'll need to be insured for certain things, or we want to have the estate planning in place. So it's never too late, but the earlier the better. Maybe not 6 years old as we were speaking earlier, but the earlier the better we start hitting those topics.
But if you're already a business owner, you're mid-career, you're a business owner, it's almost never too early to start talking about what the exit will look like and when that is, and understanding those numbers.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. And to your point, Oliver, it is a bit of an unknown. What is this business worth? And what are we gonna end up with at the end of the day? And if it all comes at once, or if it's in some sort of installment sale, can we map that out and be thoughtful about how do we utilize those assets, or get out ahead of things, and be thoughtful about it. um, it is never too early to have those conversations. But to the point around valuation, we can, I do this with clients who just aren't sure what their business is worth. And so we can run a scenario with, okay, business is worth X or business is worth Y. What does this allow us to do? What does that allow us to do? And that's one of the fun things about working with clients is, testing out, or, different future scenarios. What if we did X, or what if we did Y? And start to explore those different things. And it definitely ties into liquidating a business or something like that.
Yeah, and so as a business broker, business evaluation is the starting point and the jumping off point. And again, and just like selling a business is a part of the overall financial plan, a business broker, a financial planner, an attorney, a CPA are all part of the team. So I'm happy to be looped in and help with the business evaluation portion of it. If it then proceeds to sale, then we can take it from there. But then at least the rest of the pieces are in place. There's a scenario where uh business owners spend their entire career, this is their life's work, they spent their entire career, they invest their blood, sweat, and tears and everything they have into starting the business, running the business,
Hmm.
building it into something that's of value. And then the last chapter, it just tends to be an afterthought. Sometimes they'll just, well, we're tired, we're stressed out, we need to retire, something happens, there may be a life event that sort of accelerates the exit, and then the exit can kind of get crumpled up and say, okay, now we're selling. So paying attention to that last chapter and giving it its due, just like your beginning, middle, and an end. The end of the story can sometimes ruin the story, even if the beginning and the middle were great. So
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I think from where you are, the questions of people have a liquidity event coming up, the psychology can be, I just need as much money as possible, but that's not always the case, right? So
Yeah.
shifting the mindset, and I don't know if you have those conversations of how much money do you need other than as much as possible, just like with your daughter, I'll just give it all to charity. It's like, well, it's a good idea, it sounds like it, but wait a minute, let's talk about it. How much money do you need? Because if you
Yeah.
don't need all of it, then there are things we can do.
Yeah. Sometimes I have clients where they're very focused on, I need to have a certain dollar amount. That's just the driver. Like, this is the amount of money I need. How they landed there,
No
I
one knows.
sometimes I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But then you start to tease it out a little bit. I don't really get focused on that number. I want to be very thoughtful about what are we actually planning for? What
Hmm.
are you wanting to do with the remainder of your life? Um, you know, do you have to replace a car every 10 years? Do you want to travel? Do you want to leave a certain amount of money for charity, or your heirs, or things like that? Let's start to map that out. And that might suggest, a completely different view on what has to happen with the transition of this business. Um, you kind of talked around the psychology of things. I'm a financial planner, and so everybody is kind of like, well, we're going to talk a lot about numbers. Well, we do talk about numbers, but there's a lot of non-numbers conversations that I have with
The
clients.
the why conversations.
Why? Exactly. Motivations, what are we after here? What's driving this? Again, I kind of alluded to it earlier that there's a lot of emotion, a lot of baggage tied up into money topics. And so the non-numbers conversations, I have gotten some pretty positive feedback from clients that they kind of weren't expecting the non-numbers piece of things, but we do spend quite a lot of time talking about the whys of things. Like, sometimes it's talking with spouses who may come from different backgrounds, different thoughts on monies, different perspectives of the future. Sometimes there's conversations that are had sometimes are very emotional. Money can be a very emotional topic,
It
and
is. It's
and for any number of reasons, money is an emotional topic. And so the downside of meeting virtually that I do with clients is I can't hand a tissue across the
yeah.
table to my clients sometimes. But I like to create space for that, because if we don't give attention to the non-numbers side of things, then I don't know that we're doing at least my approach when we're talking about financial planning. It's all part of it.
I mean, I think that's an integral part of being a trusted advisor is that you need to be able to have honest and sometimes difficult conversations that answer the question that you were brought in to answer. Because the tendency sometimes, especially around hard conversations, can be to ease tension, tell people what they want to hear. But if you're not delivering on the goals, then, or not giving them your expertise that you're sort of solely, or not solely, but that's why you're there. They brought you in because you're the expert, and you're veering from that, to ease the burden. I think we're not doing our job as advisors at that point. So I bet you're sitting there sometimes in your client conversations and you're realizing, hey, this is the first time these people are, they may have been married for 30, 40 years, and this is the first time they're having this particular conversation. They have never talked about this.
Yeah, I at times feel privileged that I even get to be part of this conversation. A lot of the times in our meetings, I'm asking questions, and sometimes don't have answers to the questions or haven't really thought about it. But then there's kind of value to them stepping away and kind of talking offline, thinking about things independently, thinking about things together. And I feel very privileged to be part of that process, to kind of make progress that way and kind of you know, create some positive conversations around that. And I just want to take a minute to appreciate you, Oliver, when my wife and I were selling our business, you gave us some hard truths, and you were very honest, and you're very easy to talk to about that kind of stuff. And
Thank you.
we appreciate the space you created for us, and I try to do the same with my clients too.
No, I appreciate it. And then I remember some of those conversations. I, but I think again, if a year later we've had really good conversations and we're really good friends, but I haven't delivered what you hired me for, uh, then I haven't done my job as the advisor that you hired me. So it comes from a place of, I think for both of us, from a place of, you know, love, understanding, and professional integrity. And so I think there's a space there. And this is a good question. I mean, how do you integrate kind of your personal and professional lives? Because sometimes you as an advisor you can hear some of these difficult conversations, and they stay with you, right? And then you're at the dinner table, or you're with how do you draw the lines, but still
Yeah.
be a good family man and a good advisor.
Yeah, I you know, I I benefit from having conversations. So there's some personal benefit that sometimes I've got clients thinking about things, talking about things that I'm talking with my own spouse about. And, kind of selfishly, I benefit from hearing them talk about things. But, there are some conversations that, sometimes I have clients that lose spouses unexpectedly and, stuff like that, you know, does impact me. But I know that I can be of assistance. I know I can be a helping hand in a lot of these situations, and that's kind of ties into my fee structure where I am a fiduciary. I know my clients know what I'm doing is in their best interest, and so I know that that kind of creates some space where we can have some honest conversations, and I'm not just trying to figure out how do I make that next commission off my client. And so yeah, there's a lot of emotion, a lot of stuff happening in these meetings, and it does, I feel privileged that I can kind of take some of that with me and think about it at the end of the day.
Mhm. Yeah, and you're aligned from a business model incentive standpoint, right? With the clients, there isn't a an advantage or a benefit. It's a win-win. It's always a win-win, which is a and our business model is the same. So and so I sometimes I hesitate to understand how anything else can make sense in how any other business model can make sense, because in the world of entrepreneurship, if it doesn't benefit the consumer, they're just not going to go and buy your product. It's their
Yeah.
choice, right? And so if anybody was forced, which I guess some things you are, but so that I think that's the right way to do business.
Yeah, I lean on my approach, because it just I feel good that I'm not like hiding how I'm benefiting from this relationship. Like I am very straightforward that I have to charge for my services. I do have to pay my own bills, but there is no hidden anything. This may be a little different than, again, from the headlines we see with regard to money and investing in finances and the stock market. It's just like, just like you pay your attorney and just like you pay your CPA, you're gonna pay me, and it's a one for one relationship, and it allows me the space to just be honest and transparent, and I think, help my clients. So
Yeah, I think it feels like a breath of fresh air to the clients. I mean, they understand, uh, just like in some of those difficult conversations, if you get to them and you have the why conversations, um, you know, they then there isn't something driving decisions that hasn't been addressed, right? Some fear, some amount of money that maybe, based on incomplete or inaccurate information, or could just be irrational fear that hasn't been talked about. Same
mhm.
thing with the business model. I think if the client completely fully understands, and there's complete transparency, then the conversations are easier to have as well. Like, you kind of
I
have
think
everything
so,
in
yeah.
front of you. It's just and I think you need that space and you need that foundation to be an advisor, just because the conversations can be difficult and they require trust. So
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So um just shift gears a little bit to, we are impacted by kind of the macroeconomic sort of factors, and also legislature, right? I mean, this
Mhm.
is a heavily, highly regulated industry where we're
Yeah,
impacted by, various laws and then legislature that gets passed down, and then we need to adjust. And again, that requires planning too. So things like, you know, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and that kind of things that expire, there are incentives that come and go. I mean, how do you build in? Is that a part of it? Do you keep an eye on sort of what's coming down,
yeah,
and does
yeah.
that inform how you structure your advice?
Yeah, I absolutely have to be plugged into what's happening, on the horizon as far as law changes, tax laws, all that's, involved there. I, as a certified financial planner and as a registered investment advisor, I'm required to take continuing education, and a lot of that is what's happening with law changes and things like that. And it is one way that I serve clients is to be up to date on that. And if there are opportunities, before a law comes into place or after a law comes into place, that's my responsibility there. Um, it's been interesting. There was a big tax law change, the OBBBA, that came into place, not too long
The
ago.
big bill, beautiful bill act. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not easy to say.
Right.
Um, and the Secure 2.0 brought about some interesting stuff, and there's always different things on the horizon. But um, yeah, it's really important to stay on top of that kind of stuff, and to see how that might benefit clients and their
And is there
situation.
something in the pipeline that's coming that's big that we should be aware of?
Well, I don't know if it's something that's coming. I don't know, but I engage with a lot of clients here in the state of Washington that still aren't aware that we have a capital gains tax here in the state of Washington, and that is a really important consideration when making transitions within a portfolio or otherwise, to be aware of. And so it's an opportunity for me to get out in front of that and let clients know about that. Even if it doesn't necessarily impact them now, I want them to be aware of it, that it could be something that impacts them in the future. So yeah,
Just
stuff
putting
like
it
that.
on their radar and making sure that they're aware. Yeah.
Yeah.
I-
Yeah. I mean, in client meetings, I will say, I don't think this impacts you right now, but I want you to be aware of it, that it might be an issue of concern in the future. And, in the space of taxes and in the space of estate planning, I let my clients know I'm a financial planner. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an accountant. And so we talk strategically about those topics and opportunities. But I'll also say, go confirm this with your attorney or go confirm this with your accountant, because they're in the weeds. They're the experts on executing that kind of stuff. And so sometimes I'm in communication with those professionals on some of these newer topics. Sometimes.
Yeah, and it's again the importance of working with the team because in each one of these areas, considering the impact that each one of these areas can have, you want a professional whose core area of focus is that area, right? And
Yeah.
and they can come in and out, and as you can recommend them and bring them in as needed. But I'll have those conversations too. It's without giving you tax advice, consider these things, right? Without
Yeah.
giving you legal or contractual advice, think about these things or talk to your attorney about X, Y, and Z. So that's the
Yeah.
benefit I think of having a team, and really a team in place for a business owner. I mean, a business owner should have a financial planner, a CPA, an
Yeah.
attorney, that they have a relationship with, that they can call on. That's sort of more or less familiar with their situation, and they're not starting from zero every time something happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're kind of spot on there. As again, to use the phrase a fiduciary, doing things in the best interest of my client, that may mean recommending that they go talk to someone else. My ego isn't so big that I wouldn't entertain the expert advice of someone else, and that is what serves a client best, is to have input from those areas. Estate planning, an attorney; taxes, an accountant; insurance. Um, you know,
Insurance is a completely separate
insurance
world within it.
professional, right? So that definitely insurance, things like that impact a business owner. Where what if you, the business owner, is no longer incapacitated perhaps, or what happens then? Can insurance help that situation? And so yeah, it's really important as a financial planner. Sometimes, forgive me for using this, but sometimes I view a financial planner as kind of like the quarterback, and
Mhm.
then we delegate to the other players on the team, which is okay, now this is the attorney's realm. Let's check in with them. Let's pass the ball to the accountant, right? Let's delegate and make sure that what we're doing in totality is best for you, the client. Or Oliver, the business broker. Go talk to Oliver because
This
he's
is the
the expert
time,
in
yeah.
taxes. Yeah.
And I often use the general contractor analogy with business owners. If you're
Hmm.
the general contractor on the job, you need to figure out what it's going to look like from start to finish, who the subcontractors are, and when to bring them in. Right.
Yeah.
So if you as the general contractor are bringing in the flooring guy, before the walls are up, uh, or bringing in the roofer at the wrong time, you're going to have a hard time constructing that house.
Well,
So
that's an interesting point. You talk about the timing of it. That's right. And how do we set up the client to have the best interaction with these professionals? What should we be talking about, getting a sense for, having a plan for, and then going to the attorney to confirm this is the right strategy or invite other opportunities? How do we set up these others for success? That is, I feel, partly my role is how do I make the most of their time on behalf of the client? So yeah,
and timing is key in setting, some of these partners up for success, right? Because if you're bringing people in at the wrong time, they may say, I could have helped you 2 months ago, but oftentimes that is the case with, you know, if you've signed contracts or certain commitments before the attorney has had a chance to look at it, or if you've sort of put in place, certain strategies, and then the tax professionals may say that, and it's, again, but it's not, you can always, do, it's not too late oftentimes, but there are optimal time windows, right, for these things.
yeah. Sometimes I'm working with clients and kind of in the initial onboarding, getting started up kind of a thing. I'll identify something that is like, okay, let's hit pause on everything and go talk to the insurance professional because we don't want to go another 24 hours without some giving consideration to this thing, or let's get the ball rolling so that when we're ready that we're going to execute without time wasted. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, no, and then there's such a legal term, time of the essence, and time is almost always of the essence. Like name a name a time when it's not of the essence. So
Yeah.
and oftentimes early stage conversations, if you don't know, very often, we have complimentary introductory
Yeah.
consultations. Come talk to one of us. Many other professionals do as well.
Yeah.
You can learn a lot in that hour, and the idea, the question of why. You touched on it. I, you know, why are you saving? Why do you need an X amount of money? Right? There's a parallel to the fitness world and healthy lifestyles, and then people will pick a workout or in kind of an eating pattern, or and it's why are you doing a certain type of exercise? I'm going to bench press, I'm going to run, I'm going to climb. Why are you doing it? What is
Yeah.
it dressing in your lifestyle? What are you hoping to be able to do between the ages of 50 and 60? If
Yeah.
that's the place you're at, and that's what you should be training for, right? You
Yeah.
should be training for, the thing you saw on Instagram or somewhere else, because they have different goals. I mean, yeah.
Totally, totally. And Oliver, it is so important that that goals conversation, it's the first conversation that I have with clients.
Yeah.
What are we planning for? What do you want to do? What does the future hold? In my first meeting with clients, we don't even really get into the numbers. We don't look at the account values. We don't look at insurance
You
coverages.
don't have spreadsheets in front of you. You are just
I don't ask a lot of numbers questions. I want to know what is most important. What are the priorities? What are the goals? What haven't you thought about? And what can I ask that will prompt you to think about it? And so I share some questions in advance of that first meeting, some really big thinking, big idea questions to kind of get the gears turning to come into that meeting ready to talk about what that future holds. And again, it's an opportunity to kind of sit with it individually, to talk about it with your spouse, and then, come into that meeting. And it isn't the last time we talk about goals, because that meeting might trigger new goals or new considerations. And that is an iterative process. Those goals aren't static. That is something that may change over time. And so it is paramount that we have
Mhm.
a really thorough, thoughtful conversation about, what are we planning for? What's the purpose? Why
Yeah.
are we doing this?
Why are we doing this? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And uh, it can prompt, I mean, the questions you ask on those introductory calls can prompt some, open up some big topics of conversation that require time to process, right? It's this why. Okay, I thought I needed all this money. Maybe I don't. Can you get through that in one day? Probably not. You may need to disconnect. You may need to go on vacation. You may need to talk to your family, spend some time with kids. You may need to do nothing for a week and then emerge with an answer. 6 weeks to 2 months later, you come to a realization, and now your position on this has changed. So
Yeah.
they're incredibly important, but you never get to them unless someone like yourself asks that right question. And you don't
Yeah.
have the answer, right? You're just someone who asks the right question.
Well, I think that is a big value that a financial planner can provide, is asking the right questions. And I'm going to tie this into artificial intelligence, because
Okay.
this is a very powerful technology that's here and is going to get better. And so you start to wonder, where is a financial professional's place in the universe of artificial
Great question.
intelligence?
Do they have one?
Um, and I think about that quite a bit. I am, I utilize some of it in my practice to make my practice more efficient, to allow me to continue to operate as a solo practitioner. I think it's great for a lot of reasons, but I also understand that, it could replace aspects of the service that I provide in the future. In the future, underline, double underline, there's still a lot of issues to be figured out. But it kind of just reaffirms for me the value of someone like myself as a financial professional, is who's going to ask the questions. Like, the questions are really important. Again, what are we planning for? All those kind of things. I don't know how quickly AI is going to replace that, but having a thoughtful human ear to hear the answers, to then ask the next question that follows, and to really suss out and be thoughtful about, again, what are we planning for?
I think that's a great point, because one of the cons, there's many pros to AI, and obviously the potential sky's the limit. But one of the objections to it is that it wants to agree with the user, right? And it wants to support them. And it doesn't want to ask too difficult a question or make too contradictory an assertion, which is again required to get to the bottom of the why and the goal. So, the
Yeah.
day that it starts meaningfully disagreeing is probably when we need to
And
worry. But it may be a
instead
while.
of starting the response with "great idea" or
That's a
"good
fantastic
thought,"
idea. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. Let's work
well,
on it for you.
which isn't to say that, a client isn't sharing good thoughts, but,
Yeah.
I think the value, I think what clients in part look to me for is to tell the truth. Like, okay, that is one way to think about it, and in a caring, thoughtful way, how do I present an alternative consideration? Or this thing might be a little bit better than what you're doing.
Mhm.
Um, I only offer it because I think it would benefit you more if we did this thing. And so, um, you know, right. When does AI, take that over? I don't know. But, that I think the value of working with a human at this point in time is that, like I've been sharing, is kind of teasing out the truth of things, the
Mhm.
reality, being truthful about things.
Yeah, and that's a big unknown, and it's an exciting unknown, right? AI, if we could call it that, it's probably an exciting unknown.
Yeah.
I think it has made, the rate of acceleration is one thing that at least I couldn't have predicted. I mean, what I saw even 6 months ago or a year ago couldn't have told me where we will be today. I can only
Yeah.
imagine 5 years, and it questions not only the place of a business broker or a financial planner. It questions the role of what's the role of a human being in this universe, right? Are we even is there you see you mentioned, is the only remaining job programming AI. I think even that ultimately gets
I,
out.
yeah, right, right.
It's just a self-optimizing, ever improving machine. To what end, we don't know, but we may become obsolete. Who knows?
Yeah, I think we those that aren't willing to adapt and pivot with the tool and make the most of it in whatever you're doing, I think, you know, they're going to get passed by it. Like it's just kind of the new reality of things. And um there will be niches created where the AI can't fill the gap. And, um, maybe that's the more human element of things. I do know that, we talk about the human element and AI. I know that some people look to AI for, help with, therapy issues, in lieu of a human therapist and things like that. And if that serves them, fine. But I think there's also going to be some space. If you think about financial planning, maybe it's less of the numbers stuff is done by the human, but more of the human side of things, the conversations, the talking about, why do you have this money baggage? What was your childhood like with money? I mean,
Mhm.
a lot of what we
What a great
do
question.
today, a lot of what we think about money is you can pinpoint almost perfectly some sort of childhood experience,
If you keep
memory,
peeling the onion long
something.
enough, you're gonna get there and say, "This is it. This is the one event."
Some of the questions that I ask in that first conversation are like, what are your first memories of money? Um, did you talk about money issues with your family? And sometimes that's when the tears start to stream because we are so full of emotional baggage with money stuff. And sometimes we don't
And
even have a
fear,
clue that it
right?
sits
The
there, right?
ever-present fear that there isn't enough.
Sometimes the spouse is hearing and learning these things for the very first time, and it's an opportunity to connect on another level. It's an opportunity for new conversations. It's an opportunity for new perspectives, like, oh, that's why my spouse is always resistant to spending. It's because her parents grew up in the Great Depression and they had no money, and all these kind of things that I think, or I wonder how quickly AI can kind of
In address.
replace that, or at least be a human, you know, third party to be asking the questions and hearing the answers and, empathizing. Maybe empathy is the future for
Maybe,
humans.
yeah, that's a good one. Or can AI be a therapist, a marriage counselor, and a financial planner for a client in one sitting? Like, sounds like you sometimes are. And
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
counselor on top of it,
y-
so
Yep. Well,
interesting stuff. But I think one of the things you touched on is um college, and how this ties in is what's the value of college education.
yeah.
I think the most valuable skill, it looks like, is the skill of learning new skills and changing, for in the future, and adapting, and as an entrepreneur, and you've reinvented yourself several times, right? And Madison Management was one of those chapters where you
Yeah.
transitioned in and transitioned out, and both you and Melissa went on to do other things, and made a
Mhm.
decision to sell a successful business.
Yeah.
You know, and chapters often get talked about because they're easily defined. Here's what I did here, then I did this, then I did this. What happens in transition? And what happened? What was that transition like for you, for you to just go and do something else? And it wasn't entirely new, but
Yeah. Well, it's, I think about that question and I go further back than just the recent sale of our business that, my wife and I kind of came together and, we didn't come from families of entrepreneurs. Everybody was working for somebody else. Nobody had started businesses. And, we kind of at that point in our life had weathered the Great Recession, and all of our colleagues are getting laid off
the
and
rate of
stuff like
2008
that.
you're talking about.
Yeah, that period of time, and it's and we had a taste for entrepreneurship with the property, the renting properties and things like that, kind of doing it for yourself, right? Um, so that was a big step. That was a big leap to kind of start to step out and do things on our own, to work for ourselves. And there are, I will tell you, some of the most exciting moments and some of the scariest moments, starting a
That's
thing.
great. Excitement to total just paralysis.
I mean, really, the starting of the thing, making that leap to leave your nice, stable W-2 job into that 1099 world,
With
maybe.
vacation and benefits and
You
weekend.
know, what business owner takes vacations is the big question. Like, and if I can be specific to property management, maybe my wife and I were a little short-sighted on this, that we were like, okay, we'll be business owners and it'll be a very big thing in our life that will take a lot of our time. But we were fool enough to pick a business that is a 24/7 business.
Yeah.
Property management doesn't go to sleep. And so it happens all day and it happens all night. And there's no break. And I fully appreciate business owners who are plugged into their business 24/7. And then you throw on that you never have the break there. But it is again very exciting, very scary to transition away. I was fortunate with the sale of our business, the property management business, is I kind of knew what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
I knew I wanted to get back into financial planning because that had always, you know, first it pays the bills, but it really allows me to do something where I feel like I'm kind of paying it forward in a way. Like I feel like I am genuinely helping people in their lives make, a better life for themselves, for their family. It is a very rewarding profession. Um, so I was fortunate to do that, but still it was a bit scary because I had always thought about kind of going out on my own as a financial planner. But as you can see from my biography, I spent 15, 20 years working for other people because
Mhm.
I was so hesitant to make that jump. But I benefited from the property management business because it taught me how to operate a business. It taught me a lot of the things to consider, what it's like to have employees and all that is involved there. When you have employees, you start to shift away from the doing of the thing that your business is to the management of the employees that you have. And that is a whole kind of different ball of wax. So all of those kind of things really set the table for me to have confidence kind of shifting into this as my own business owner, a financial planner. But it is not without excitement, and it is not without, fright, if you will, all along the way. It's
But that
quite a
second leap was easier. I would say, going starting Madison management and then
yeah.
go Madison management to sounds like what ultimately was your sort of dream destination. You become a business owner as a property management company owner, but here you combine business
Yeah.
owner and your professional passion.
Yeah, and I can my wife and I do reflect on this quite often. The property management business was really hard, and it was It was hard as a business owner. It was hard as a couple co-owning a property management business. There were a lot of challenges on the family just
Mhm.
by virtue of no time and, is it time to connect on a personal level, or are we going to talk about business? What is the right balance of work between us? You
And
know,
there's one person that wants to talk about your relationship, and somebody is still in the business headspace, and there's a clash.
I not to kind of veer off here, but I was reading your newsletter and Oliver, and
Yeah,
you shared some information about you making a transition, and you had a business with, I think, a spouse, and
yeah.
I can kind of appreciate some of the things that you were probably experiencing and how challenging that must have been.
It's difficult, we're raising kids, we're running a business, we're trying to maintain a relationship. A lines blur, there is no that idea of work-life balance was a myth for a long time.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
that's kind of where what informs my. I mean, we bring our experiences, right, and that's the only thing we can sort of authentically talk about is what we
yeah.
went through. So,
Yeah, and thinking about that work-life balance question, working with my wife, who I love dearly, who is my best friend, but we came to the conclusion going forward, we're going to start businesses, but we're going to start our own businesses. Like, you go
mhm.
do your thing, and I'll do my thing, and we'll come home at the end of the day, and we'll be husband
And
and
tell
wife.
each other something new, right? Each.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's right.
Yeah, right. No, it's not easy, and family businesses, the family stuff tends to come first, and the business stuff and the money stuff is heavy, and
Yeah,
it can be um it's a difficult dynamic, and I completely understand why people don't want to be in business together and why they want to run separate businesses or have different careers, and just come home and have time for themselves rather than
yeah.
still having this business that they both share. So,
Yeah.
um eh, is there anything, and I appreciate the transition narrative. I mean, it's so important for business owners. That what is that space like, because it doesn't get talked about enough, because we're just going from here to here. Here are the main stops, and so understanding that is a time of uncertainty and often a place of growth. And you probably wouldn't have ended up at starting Embolden if you didn't run Madison Management, Melissa, if
No.
right?
No, yeah, yeah. I mean, exactly. The value, a huge value to operating that business is that it gave me kind of the courage and the freedom and the space to go do this thing without fear. I mean, I knew I could do the financial planning piece, but the actual operation of the business, I mean, that for any business owner, that's what comes with it. You go out and you do this thing that you do, but there's always this operating the business side of thing that not everybody is comfortable with or familiar with, or whatever. um I Having gone through that, I was much more comfortable that I could handle that going forward. Yeah,
You now have the skill, and you now have the skill of managing adversity and operating in some level of uncertainty, and getting to a place of comfort. So I mean,
yeah.
that's a skill of business ownership, I think, that can't be taught in school. Is you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable for long periods of time. So
That is so well put. Yeah, it's such an exciting idea to go start your own business and just kind of go out on your own and make your way in life. But it is.
and then
Um,
something that you plan, you do it, you get there, and then nothing you planned works, right? Or things happen, like, and you look at it as like, oh, this is not what I imagined at all.
yeah,
But
yeah,
you are now here, and now this is your situation. What do you do? you know?
and to be flexible and have the courage to just keep pressing forward, to make a decision. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, pivot and keep moving forward.
Yeah. Great advice. Do you have a few more minutes?
Oh yeah, sure.
Couple more? Okay. Well, just a few questions. Uh, Anything that folks should be, anything you're excited in terms of books, podcasts, resources? I mean, entry level stuff that people can, or advanced level, doesn't matter. I mean, what kind of stuff are you reading and listening to these days?
Yeah, so I'll just key on a couple of things. One is a book that I find myself, actually a couple of books that I find myself sharing in client meetings because topics pop up, and these books are just really perfect. And the first book is it's written by Bill Perkins. It's called Die with Zero.
Okay.
And this was, as a financial planner, it actually created a mind shift for me. The premise of the book is, it isn't about like saving, and then, as the title says, die with, all this money that you then get to leave to charity or your kids or whomever. But it's focused on bringing forward those dollars into your lifetime and maybe being more thoughtful about getting those dollars to the charities or your kids, or spending it on the things that you want to do during your life before you get too old to enjoy it, or before you kind of pass away with no opportunity to enjoy it. And so certainly some planning is required to make this happen, because you can't just literally spend to zero and then be dependent on others for the remainder of your life. So you got to be thoughtful about it. You got to plan for it. But it was a mind shift for me because I grew up in a household where it was nothing but save, 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 save. My parents weren't really thoughtful about why we're saving. And, I kind of see it with my own mom, that she'll be dying with meaningful assets. And my dad already passed away, didn't get to enjoy it. She doesn't have the concept of spending.
Mm-hmm.
So she doesn't get to enjoy all of their hard work, right? And so that kind of just reaffirms what this book is saying, is find the balance in life. Don't go nuts blowing everything, right? But does it mean taking some time off of work and then coming back to work maybe in a period that is more considered the retirement phase of life? Or does it mean shifting down in your amount of income but working for longer because you're able to create greater work life balance? Lots of this stuff is in this book, and I think it's really valuable. And I share it a lot with clients because, again, a lot of us were just like save, 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 but not focused on finding the balance with those dollars that we're saving. So,
I mean,
um,
I think these are powerful concepts. The idea of the whole, you mentioned concept of spending, right? People have the concept of saving, but not the concept of spending. And I think it's something that if you just pass that money along, even if it goes to your heirs, I think what you haven't passed along is the example of what money is for, and the fact that money is a means to an end and not an end in and of itself, which often the
yeah,
previous generations, that's their idea, is that money, it doesn't matter why, save, 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 don't know how to spend, don't know, haven't enjoyed the fruits of your labor. And whether you like it or not, your kids and grandkids see that, right? And so
yeah.
if that's what you've passed down, you've probably done them a disservice, even if it came with a large chunk of money, because maybe they won't know what to do with it, right? So
Yeah, I mean, my mom is going to die with money, and I feel in a way sad and disappointed because she could have traveled more. She could have, they could have done more things, but they didn't. Little self promotion here. They didn't go talk to a financial planner. They
right.
didn't build out a roadmap. They didn't see what was possible. They just didn't know what was possible. And the default was put it in a savings account, savings account, savings account. and they didn't get an opportunity to enjoy it. Now my mom's too old to travel, all those things. It is an incredible mind shift to hit that phase where you're done saving and now to spend. And it is a hard thing to embrace. And sometimes getting a plan creates the space, the freedom, the capacity to actually go do that thing, to go take that trip, take your kids with you.
And
You
maybe
know,
the permission, right, that they
the
need.
permission. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
we've said this probably 10, 15 times that, it's better late than never, and that there isn't too late. But time is finite, and arguably for your mom and many others, it is too late to do some of these things. I mean, so there is,
Yeah.
you have plenty of time, but there isn't too late, and do things when you can, and tomorrow is promised to no one. And then some of these, mid-career shifts that we're talking about, it's the model was you own a successful business, and then you run it until you retire, and then you do the traditional things in retirement. But it's, and kids question it for good reason, it's flawed in many ways, because by the time you retire, you can't enjoy, many fruits of your labor. You are older, your health isn't, maybe so great. And so uh I think understanding that, back to time being of the essence, it truly is of the essence. And so having the whys in place, and using money as a means to an end to accomplish those goals, I think is a
Yeah.
is a task worth undertaking.
Yeah. It's interesting. You see the headlines about, historical amounts of wealth are going to pass from the boomer generation to the next generation. I also suspect that a non monetary benefit or inheritance that we're going to receive is the value of being a little more proactive in using those assets during our lifetime, being thoughtful about not dying with a bunch, but enjoying it, seeing others enjoy it. I mean, giving to charities, seeing people that are hungry getting food, benefiting immediately from these dollars, as opposed to just kind of pushing it off into the some unknown future.
I mean, what
Um,
can be more rewarding than some of those things you just listed?
yeah.
It's seeing that. And what do you think about the other end of the spectrum, to where people with substantial means say, my kids get nothing, they have to go make their own way? You've heard that school of thought, I'm sure.
Yeah, I in fact have clients who say, "Yep, we're going to spend to zero." We've helped them with some things along the way. We'll continue to help them, but we've also taught them how to go do what we did. Now, I will caveat that generationally there are some challenges for younger generations that older generations may have experienced something differently. So, I encourage clients to at least think about, what is your future going to look like for your kids? Do you want to leave them something? Do you want to do something now? But you know, it really is where you place your values, what you want to do. There's all sorts of connective tissue to different topics there in that space of conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Exciting range of topics. But I mean, I think this is a good place to stop. It's been a phenomenal conversation. We touched on a lot of nuggets that can each be, a 10-hour conversation in their own right. But I mean, if people want to find you and talk about what you do, and learn more about financial planning, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, yeah. Great starting point is my website. It's emboldenfp.com. And lots of I hope useful information on there about myself and my practice. But for anyone interested in kind of engaging in financial planning, I'd encourage you to schedule a free introduction meeting, which I offer to anyone interested. It's just a half hour to share what has you interested in financial planning? And it's an opportunity for me to kind of share how we could work together and the services I offer and how they might benefit you, the client. Really a great opportunity to get those questions answered and to learn more about myself and my practice.
Awesome. We'll put the contact information in the show notes. If you want to reach out to Tim, and please say hello to Melissa for me.
I will.
And happy holidays to you guys.
Same to you. Thank you so much for your time, Oliver. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.